Welcome, everyone, to the Sales Hacker workshop. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with us. We have got absolute experts here from Drift, Lead IQ, Outreach, Memory Blue, and some really fun activities lined up to make this really interactive. And they're going to give you real emails, real plays to walk away with. I'm really excited. So we've still got some folks rolling in. Thank you to all 100 and almost 10 of you that are here so far. So we're just going to give folks a few more moments and do some quick housekeeping. So go find your chat box at the bottom and tell us your name, your role, fun fact about yourself. We'll have some prompts throughout the workshop so to get everyone talking to each other. We want you to take advantage and chat with the other attendees while you're live. If you have a question for the guests on the call, you'll find that we have a Q&A box. So please ask any questions that you want answered live there. Now I'm going to turn it over to Julianne, your incredible host today. Julianne, welcome, and thank you so much for running this workshop.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation today. We are going to have some fun talking about some binge-worthy sales emails and sales plays from three of the best in the industry. So quick introduction, if I haven't met you yet, I'm Julianne Thompson. I'm Director of Sales Development here at Drift. I oversee inbound, outbound, chat, and our international teams. And if you're not familiar with Drift, we're a revenue acceleration platform that helps connect your marketing and your selling team to drive more pipeline within your target accounts. And I'm really excited with the people who are joining me today. Have a really good connection with each of them. So I'll do a quick intro and then let them talk a little bit about themselves and their company. But first we have Nimit. So fun fact, Nimit was my first SDR manager 100 years ago. And so he and I go way back. He taught me everything I know about cold calling. And so really excited to have him joining us today. Nimit, you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself as well as tell us about Memory Blue?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. So great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Nimit Bhatt, Head of Sales at Memory Blue. We are a sales development consulting firm for B2B technology companies, primarily focusing on acting as an outsourced sales development team for our clients, but also providing sales recruiting as well as SDR training for our clients. So excited to be here. Hopefully I can provide some knowledge for the audience here to take away and take back to their sales game.
Awesome. Excited to have you. Next, we have Megan Donovan. Very excited to have Megan as well. Megan and I also have a history together. So I worked with Megan at Outreach, where she was one of our top SDRs, and she's in a really cool and unique role that I think some of you might be able to get something out of today. So Megan, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself as well as for those who aren't familiar with Outreach, what you guys do?
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that about Nimit because that's how I feel about you. You taught me everything I know about cold calling and writing great emails. So super excited to be here. My name is Megan Donovan. I'm the sales sequence specialist at Outreach. My role is primarily creating, managing, and measuring our sequences, templates, and snippets within the platform. And if you don't know about Outreach, Outreach is an intelligence and engagement platform that accelerates your revenue strategy by providing AI-driven insights. So I'm super excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. So glad to have you. And then last but certainly not least, to the man that needs no introduction, we have Ryan O'Hara. And if you're seeing a theme, Ryan and I also go way back. And so we've done a ton of content together. I always love having Ryan aboard because anytime there's like that awkward silence in a webinar, Ryan makes sure that it does not happen. So we're going to have some fun today. Ryan, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and, of course, what you do at Lead IQ?
Yeah, what's up, everybody? Happy New Year. So I am VP of Marketing and Growth at Lead IQ, and we help companies with making their reps focus on high-value activities. That means automating anything that doesn't take thinking and making it so that you can free up time to do more personalization, focus on your prospecting, and just have good outcomes and stuff. I'm really happy to be here. Big fan of Drift, Outreach, Memory Blue. You guys are awesome. Saying hi to everyone. If you have any questions, by the way, for us, make sure you use the Q&A thing. I like questions. Questions are fun.
Absolutely. Let's make this as interactive and entertaining as possible. All right. Speaking of entertainment, we're jumping right in with a poll. So we're talking about sequences, or we're talking about personalization. We're talking about email plays. So we want to know who within your organization is responsible for writing emails, writing sequences or cadences. And we're going to go over some of the answers from our three panelists today. What I'm seeing so far is reps has taken the lead here. We've got SDR leadership kind of going back and forth with marketing and demand gen, which I think is pretty interesting. So we'll give it just another minute. Very curious to see what you guys are doing at your current companies, and also very curious to see if and how that might change after the course of this conversation. So getting lots of good chats in there as well. All right, so it looks like reps is definitely the clear winner here as far as the poll goes. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nimit and Ryan and Megan to talk to us about how this is done at their organizations.
Oh man, do I go first, or do you want to? Let's have Nimit go first. I want to hear what Memory Blue does.
Sure. So I'll talk about it in two different scenarios. So for our SDR specifically, that starts with SDR leadership and then kind of works its way down. So all of our SDRs are assigned to clients, right? So they're, when they're performing their outbound cadences, they're creating all that content. So we obviously give the SDRs a freedom to be creative with personalization and looking for those key items to add into their outreach. But we also want to provide them with the templates necessary so that they're not kind of starting completely from scratch. So I guess it's a little bit of both. For my team, I run a team of 18 full cycle AEs. So I try to give them as much of the creativity as possible. We obviously have templates they can lean on, but especially with us selling services, we have to be able to tell a lot of stories and be able to pull statistics because, we're selling hopes and dreams in a way. There's no real demo they can see of what we do. We can only relate stories to them. So I like to enable them with everything they possibly need, from whether it's a statistic about, how many SDRs we've hired and our retention rate, or how many meetings we've gotten for companies in cybersecurity, or use cases here, or really any types of information worth of value, providing that to them and then letting them almost like bringing an empty plate to a buffet and just putting stuff on that I think is going to be really relevant to that specific prospect, and giving them the freedom to be creative and write their sequences.
Nimit, the way that you talked about the dichotomy between the two teams, I think is really important. I think this is why this is such a debated topic, because, you have SDRs that are a month out of college in some situations and hiring them all the time. How many SDRs did you guys hire in the last year about?
So we have over 350 SDRs currently.
Yeah. So exactly. That's a huge team. So my question would be, and I'm curious to see for those in the chat that commented that they're reps, how do you make sure that you're staying consistent with messaging if you have the reps focusing on writing all of the emails? So I would love to hear what you guys think about that. But while you guys are typing that in, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan. Tell me who writes your emails and your sequences.
Yeah, so what we do at our company is we have the order of what you do for your sequence pretty much determined by Jamison Pence, who's our director of sales development. So like, for example, a sequence for us might commonly be step 1, research the person on LinkedIn, write a couple things down. Step 2, add the person on LinkedIn, personalize your LinkedIn message. Step 3 will be an email, but a lot of the meat of what's in that email or what you say in a call will actually be left blank and open so that the rep can put their own spin on things. What we typically do, though, is if we have a persona that we make a sequence on, the value proposition will be pre-written in those things. Most of the other stuff, we kind of give poetic license to the sales development rep or the account executive. And we're going to go into this stuff a little bit later as we go through the webinar. But it's really about unlocking and making your sales rep the differentiator when you're reaching out to a prospect. Because there's 8 or 9 other companies that do everything that we all do, right? No one here is actually unique. No offense, everyone. Like, we all have competitors and stuff. So the thing that's really going to get your foot in the door and get an outbound meeting is often going to be driven by what that rep does and what makes that rep unique with their email or their call versus another rep from another company doing the same thing.
Absolutely. I wanted to call out this chat from Michael. You have to be able to customize your email sequences or cadences. Totally agree. I don't think there's a person on this call that would say that we should just be sending all automated emails. Do you think there's a time and a place for it? But totally agree that we've got to have some customization in there. So Megan, tell me about your role and answer this question for who writes sequences at Outreach.
So, two separate things. So I am writing all of the content for the SDR team. The templates, snippets, sequences, and we really focus on personalization at scale, to your point. So it's not going to be the best use of time for your reps to write every single email from scratch. But using a template to highlight common persona pains or how your company can help the prospect while including a few sentences of personalization can help your reps save a lot of time. This starts with personalization, understanding the goals and the challenges of the business that you're reaching out to, which we typically recommend our reps to pull from press releases, news articles, or public financial records, depending on the size of the organization and how much we can find out about that company. On the AE side, very similar. AEs are writing their own sequences, but the majority of the SDRs we do hire are out of college, and we like to have, control over the majority of the messaging.
Awesome. Love that. Just saw Tegan, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, that you're part of a similar type of team at your company, which I think is really cool because when I was an SDR, they didn't have people to write sequences for you. And I think this is a very budding position. And so I think a lot of people are asking themselves, does marketing own it? Does sales leadership own it? Do we just let the reps go wild and do whatever they want to do? And I really like the idea. We're not there yet at Drift, but possibly in the future, because I like the idea of having somebody dedicated to it because it's such an important part of the business. All right. So Megan, you just mentioned something at the end. So I'm going to start with you. In terms of not wasting your time writing the perfect email, I think that this is such a common question or challenge that SDR leaders have, or anybody who manages a team who's doing prospecting, is how to allocate the right amount of time for automation, where to put in automation, where to personalize, and like how much time you should be spending. And so there's not really a question here. I wanted to just talk to you guys about what your thoughts are, or what kinds of strategies you might have set up for your team to make sure that they're allocating the right amount of time, personalizing to the right companies and the right people.
Yeah, so at Outreach, we really don't want you spending more than 5 minutes on an email personalizing. So we've kind of built out what we want to see in our personalization. So that first sentence should include a piece of account research about the company, the prospect, that's relevant to why you're reaching out. And then the second and third, the follow-up to that is connecting it back to how we can help.
I think. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, after you.
I got scared with silence. Julian was right. She foreshadowed this. So I was going to say, I think one of the problems that people do is they do try and write the perfect email, and it ends up being like you get to 4 or 5 p.m. in the day and you look at your outbox and you're like, crap, I'm nowhere close to my activity. We're diving into this a little bit, but one of the things that we do when we get new reps here at LeadIQ is we do this thing called the 10-minute game. And what it is essentially is a rep has 10 minutes to find a profile, research the person, find something they have in common with the person, and then write an email and send it out. And if they don't get it in 10 minutes, they set a timer, no Slack interruptions, no Microsoft Team IMs, no email, no calls, just stay focused on getting that email out. If they don't do it in 10 minutes, they have to dump that person into an automated sequence and just send something out. It's almost like it's used as like a punishment sort of. But what's great is, similar to what Megan was saying, it turns into 5 minutes eventually because you get muscle memory and get really good at it. And a rep that's doing this for a couple weeks will be able to start getting it down to 5 minutes of doing this. And you increase your output for doing personalized messaging. And the urgency has to be there. The other thing, and I actually think I heard you say this, Julianne, once on a webinar that we did together, prospects have amnesia. So if like you botch it or you say the wrong thing in an email, they're probably not going to remember you later on when you follow up on a call or send another email.
Definitely. Nimit, what you got?
Yeah, so like for my team, we put all of the time into this during the list building process. So when they're building out accounts and they're building out prospects to go after, there's certain information we have them capture. So it's going to be, so one for circle of leverage, right? If they're reaching out to a CRO at a company, we make sure they also put into to the field who's the CMO, who's the CEO, who's the CFO, right? Kind of creating that circle of leverage. We have them capture 3 clients that we've had that are similar to them, and then a couple other pieces of information that all easily just plugs in. So when it's time to write the email, it's kind of already written because you've already captured all that data. It just plugs directly into the template, or however they want to go about it. I feel like, kind of like what Ryan was saying, like a lot of that time is spent during the research phase. So let's do that at the very beginning. You know your audience, you know your prospects, you know the companies you're going to go after. So take the time then to put all that together, and it's going to help with the muscle memory, getting you quicker to getting those emails out. But it's also giving you time to really truly research. So in the chance you get this person on the phone, you've already kind of done all this pre-research, so you'll be more equipped to actually have the cold call. I know we're talking about emails, but the cold call is also super important too.
Nimit, question for you on that to follow up. So do you guys do like an assembly line? So you do all the research part in bulk and then you do the next part afterward? Is that kind of the way it works in Memory Blue?
Yeah, so at least for my team, yeah. And a little bit with their SDRs too. Every engagement is going to be a little bit different on the SDR side, but for my team and their outbound work, all that research is done as they're building out their target accounts.
Yeah, it's pretty smart actually, because you kind of get in the muscle memory and the flow doing it. Like it's almost like if you go bowling, if you bowl and then stop for an hour, then go back and go bowling again, you're usually terrible. But if you're consistently bowling for an hour, you'll get a lot better as you go through the hour, hopefully.
Yeah, always be bowling.
That's right. ABB.
I love that. That is so true, though. I mean, there's tons of studies out there about multitasking, and there's the Pomodoro method where you do one single task for a certain amount of time before you move on to another task. I think jumping back and forth can be really difficult for SDRs. One of the most challenging parts about being an SDR is trying to figure out the right way to spend your time and how to allocate that. We actually do something similar, Nimit, where we'll have them do the research. And then one key component of outreach that I think everybody who's on this call that is using outreach but isn't using this should definitely go look into it is the account note section. Because what I find is that SDRs that aren't leveraging that account note section very well, what they'll do is they'll do that research multiple times. So it's like every time they prospect into a different prospect, or they prospect into the same account 3 months from now, keep all the information there so you don't have to re-research. So I think that could be a good helpful tip for some people. And if you don't have outreach, there's other systems that you can do to organize your notes to get the same intent. All right, game time. So somebody dropped this movie quote, if you know it, but this is not a regular webinar. This is a cool webinar. So what we're going to be doing today, we were talking about, how we wanted this to go, and we do want to keep things exciting and engagement. And so Ryan started talking about this 10-minute game that he just talked about, where you had to write an email in a certain amount of time. We do something similar at Drift. We give them like a 5-minute timer, and we'll say, okay, here's the profile of the person that we want to prospect into. Everybody go pick out the pieces of personalization, write as much of the email as you can, and you can actually see, based off of tenure, how much of the email they can get through in the next 5 minutes. So we're going to play a version of this game in a little bit. So before we jump into that, we're going to talk about the 3 different levels of email personalization. And so this is something that Ryan introduced, and I don't want to steal your thunder. So Ryan, if you want to talk through the 3 different levels, this is how we're going to be talking about personalization for the remainder of the webinar.
Do we spoil it with all 3 right away, or do you want to go one at a time?
Okay, I like that. Let's go with the first one. What's the first level of email personalization?
So we call it personalization 1.0. And the reason I call it this is because this is actually how people used to cold email. You go back, some of us have been doing cold email for 20 years now, or 15 years. It's when you do personalization based on persona. So you do it based on where they work, what their title is, maybe something that triggered you to reach out. Maybe you have some intent data. Maybe you have some sort of piece of information right there. And that we call that personalization 1.0. I feel like I have to go into the other ones because that's like where it transitions. Maybe I'll just do that. Okay. Personalization 2.0 is, and by the way, when you do personalization 1.0, you'll see response rates, somewhere probably like 3 to 5%, like you'll float around there. We actually saw data that the average reply rate on a cold email right now is less than 1%. So it's really important to figure out how to boost this. Some people don't even do personalization at that level. So if you're doing that, don't feel guilty. That's actually okay. The next level is what we call personalization 2.0. Personalization 2.0 is you realizing what you're looking at and what person you're selling to, and personalizing the message to that individual person instead. So it's not just their title, it's not just their work, because these people that you sell to are changing jobs. The reason that you need to do personalization 2.0 is people are individually motivated. Average person in SaaS, for example, works at a company for 18 months. So that means the first 6 months that they're at a company, they're young, they're figuring stuff out at the company, they're learning how it works. The next 6 months, they're kind of the change agent. They're going to do a lot of stuff and buy from vendors and change things. And the next 6 months, they're kind of waiting till like 5 p.m. every day to get their foot out the door, and they're looking for other jobs secretly behind everyone's back and breaking your heart. So that's personalization 2.0. If you can do stuff that's tied to the individual and how it basically you find things that are about that person, you're going to have a much better and higher chance of actually hearing back from the person. And then the last one that we've recently kind of uncovered and we've been digging into at Lead IQ with our sales development team is what we call personalization 3.0. This is not just stuff that's about the prospect and the company that they work for. It's stuff that's about that you have in common with that prospect that only you two have in common. It's harder to find prospects like this, but when you do, even if it's not the right persona, you have a much better chance of breaking in and getting a response from that person if you do that. So it could be common interests. Maybe you both like the same football team. Maybe you both went to the same college. That's kind of the difference here. So that's kind of the breakdown of the 3 layers of personalization that we're going to talk about today.
Let's do it. All right. You guys want to see some examples? All right. We've got the persona-based messaging. So first, we're going to have Megan talk a little bit about this email that she brought. This is one of the SDRs at Outreach wrote this email. And so a couple things I want you guys to keep in mind. Your target prospects might be different than the ones that Megan or Nimit or Ryan might have, but we're hoping that you guys can get some different elements and just see the way that they've personalized based off of the 3 different levels. And then before we jump into the actual content of the emails as well, reminder, yes, the slides will be provided to you. Don't feel like you have to write every single little thing down. And also just keeping in mind that there are different levels of personalization that you might want to do based off of the tier of the account, right? And so you might want to spend more time on your highest priority accounts, your key target white whale type of accounts, and you might want to do some of the persona based on some of the lower priority accounts. So Megan, talk us through your email.
Cool. So a couple things to call out on this email. As you can see, the first sentence shows that the rep has absolutely done their research. We're talking about the business space, and it makes the rep sound credible and knowledgeable to the prospect. Another thing that this rep does is mentions current customers and competitors in the prospect space. So Leverage, Fi, Prometric, and ProctorU. And then lastly, the personalization is short, sweet, and to the point. So it's composed of 2 sentences. First sentence is mentioning the account research that the rep has done. And then the second sentence is tying back the research to why the prospect should care that we're reaching out. So truly focused on the business as a whole.
So if we go back to that first question about who writes the emails that go out, is it safe to assume that the SDR went in and personalized the first 2 lines here, and then someone like you wrote the remainder of the email? Okay, I love that.
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome. So now you can kind of see how it all comes together live. I like that. The other thing that I really like too is, and you hear this a lot on calls as well, is, hey, other sales leaders have these concerns. And it makes you sound more credible. You understand what's going on within that particular persona. So this is the persona-based type of messaging that we're looking for. But you're also not accusing them of having those concerns, because you might have, especially if you're selling to salespeople, we can be a little bit egotistical. So you don't want to call their baby ugly per se, but you might say, hey, I know that other sales leaders have these concerns, and then drop in some of your value propositions there.
Yes.
Awesome. Drop in any feedback you guys have about this email. We'll move on to the next one, but we've all got thick skin here. If you have things you like, you don't like, let's hear about it. All right. Next up, we have Nimit. Nimit, talk us through this email.
Yeah. So like this one was a little tough to put together because we sell to sales and marketing leaders, so it's hard to. I mean, it's almost obvious that we're relating their role to sales development. It's like, well, obviously, I'm reaching out to you because you're in sales, and I'm here to talk about sales development. So oftentimes what we do is we like to relate kind of their company to a similar client that we've worked with before. So this is almost like a follow-up email. It's a follow-up on a conversation we had with this company. Looks like mid last year. So bringing that to light again. I spoke with this individual who you are related to in some way, or you know in some way. This is what they said. And given how we've done this for a company similar to yours, I figured a conversation with both of you would be warranted. So it's kind of that circle of leverage in a way of including both those individuals in there, and then just kind of keeping it kind of lighthearted. We might have chatting briefly in the coming days. Nothing like what your schedule look like tomorrow. Just keeping it kind of a little more casual because we are selling to salespeople, so they're kind of. They kind of seen it all in terms of outreach from other sales folks. We try to differentiate as much as possible.
Absolutely. Nimit, so I know circle of leverage because you taught it to me many, many moons ago. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means? Because I think this is a really good, easy way to personalize, and you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of your ROI of time.
Yeah, for sure. So it's I've heard it referred to as circling the castle as like another way of talking about it. But really, the idea behind it is if you're reaching out to somebody at one title, so let's just say VP of Sales, you then want to find other folks that are on the same level as them, potentially in different departments. So if we're reaching out to a VP of Sales, we'll find out who's the VP of Marketing, potentially a VP of Finance. So kind of keeping it all in the same kind of hierarchy and hitting all of them and finding out like who should be involved, who we should be talking to. So if I was reaching out to the VP of Sales, Julianne, and the VP of Marketing, Ryan, I would say conversation with Julianne and Ryan in the subject line, and then referencing both and then copying both. So I reach out one to Julianne, and I'd send the same thing to Ryan, copying the other person in on it, just get more eyes on it, and to also show that you've kind of done your research, that you're reaching out to multiple decision makers within a company.
Yeah. The one thing I really, really like about this too is you're probably already reaching out to multiple people within a single organization, but the fact that you're calling it out makes it seem, and it is coordinated versus like, oh man, did you just get this automated email? Me too. This is like, hey, I know that they're trying to figure out who the right people are within the buying committee that need to be involved. So I love the circle of leverage. The other thing,
one more thing I'll add there to a circle of leverage is, especially if you go across the C-suite, like Julian mentioned earlier, like no one like calling their baby ugly, but a CEO will have no problem calling the baby ugly. So if if it catches their attention, they may chime in. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen that happen, where we loop in even a CRO, like a C-level person, and they'll be like, no, yeah, we're actually having a lot of issues with our sales development team. Thanks for reaching out. Let's hop on a call and talk about it. Versus like a VP of sales or director of sales development is not going to want to admit to that, right? Or they think everything is awesome.
Awesome. All right, let's keep rolling. So I'm noticing a lot of chatter in the comments. So we're going to get through Ryan's section, but I do want to go back to some things around like, do you ask for a meeting on the first call? Do you not ask for a meeting on the first call? I want to get your opinions on that because I see it happening in the chat. But before that, Ryan.
Yeah, ours is pretty quick. So I asked Jameson Pence, who's our director of sales development, to give me an example of personalization 1.0, and he basically said, "Hey, we don't do that anymore." A lot of the time when you're doing persona-based messaging, we only have so much time in the day with our SDR team. So we're really trying to focus on only people that we can find individual information about. If we have someone that we aren't familiar with, we'll always try and go after the individual first to create context when we do that 1.0 message. So I couldn't actually dig a real example for you guys that would work for this. One thing I just want to comment on, well, actually, I'll let you facilitate the questions and I can comment on the question about asking for a meeting if you want. I'll let you facilitate.
Yeah, I absolutely do. So there's some chatter going on, but the Q&A here is from Joseph. He says, what are your thoughts on asking 2 versions for the meeting? What time would work for us next week? Or are you open to meeting with us next week? There's probably 100 different variations of this. So I'm curious what all of you guys think about this.
Yeah, I'll jump in first because I actually had some thoughts on this. So I know people get apps like Crystal Knows and Personality Test, and they'll say, hey, be direct with this prospect and all this stuff. And I know that we're trained on that a lot. One of the things that we noticed when we were doing messaging with cold email, we're not talking calling here, we're just talking cold email. We actually get higher response rates when we ask open-ended questions at the end of an email. So you'll actually see this in other emails that I wrote in the future, but we'll ask questions like, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on talking? The reason is because if I ask, can we have 15 minutes to chat? You're yes is going to be yes, and you'll get a meeting, but your no will be no reply, or not interested, or take me off your list, or unsubscribe. If you ask an open-ended question, the person can reply with an objection. When the person replies with an objection, no, comma, what are your thoughts? I don't think we'd be interested in meeting because of XYZ. There's some psychological thing where prospects are more likely to actually respond to an open-ended question. And then when you get that open-ended question, your reps, instead of writing a long email back trying to overturn an objection, their cell phone is probably in their email signature. Open up your phone and call them, and you can address the information and train them to deal with that objection. And they can, it's like almost like a warm cold call.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Megan, Nimit, what do you guys think?
I have a pretty similar answer to Ryan's. So we like to use open-ended questions, but also we're very specific with our questions. So the goal is just to get a response. So we typically use, does 3 p.m. on Thursday work for you? More than likely, the prospect is going to respond with no, that doesn't work. I'm busy at 3 p.m. on Thursday, but then objection handling comes in.
Absolutely. Nimit, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, keeping it open. Yeah, it prevents. When you give someone an option, it's easy for them to say no and just to move on to the next thing. But when you keep it open, it keeps it lighthearted. It shows you're not trying to be too pushy. And the thing is, you're not just sending them an email and then going away, right? You're going to be calling them as well. You're going to be sending them a follow-up email. So they always say in sales that yes is great, no is good, but maybe stinks. And I'm more of the camp of let's get an answer. Even if it's a no, like getting a response is better than just kind of, it's the hope that kills you, right? So kind of leaving it out there.
Yeah, we got all kinds of different answers from that. And I think this is a very heavily debated topic. If you go on any LinkedIn forum, like you're going to see these kinds of questions being asked. I have 2 thoughts about it. The first is only have one call to action, no matter what that is. If it's a question, like let's start a conversation, like I have a very specific question about the results you're trying to drive, or it's a meeting ask, whether it's a closed-ended meeting ask or an open-ended meeting ask, only get one. Otherwise, they don't know what to answer. The second thing is what works for me and what works for Nimit and what works for Ryan, what works for Megan is all different because we sell for different companies and we have different target personas. So test it, test everything. And anything, all the opinions going on. I love to see the debate in there. I think that's why Sales Hacker is always a really good forum to do this in. But my recommendation is just test it and see what works for you. All right, moving right along. Okay, so here's where the game comes in. So what we're going to have you guys do, take a peek at none other than Nimit's LinkedIn profile. So we've got some screenshots of different parts of his profile. And I want you guys to throw out in the chat things that you might use in order to write a personalized email based off of his persona. And you guys can, Nimit, it might be awkward for you to name them out, but Ryan, Megan, if you guys have ideas too. So AISP, fantastic. He is very involved in AISP, which is something that is very relevant to his persona. If you're not familiar, it's American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. So that would be something that was relevant.
Are we spoiling things if we talk? Or are we allowed to jam on this a little bit? What should we do?
Yeah, you can jam.
So like when I look at a LinkedIn profile, some of the things that I'm always looking for is who they have mutual connections with. So like that's one piece too that you can find relatability with. Another, I mean, I would clearly see that I know you, Julian, and Nimit. I just added you on LinkedIn before this webinar too, but like, I would probably find the relationship and see that you guys had overlapped and worked, and I know you really well. So I'd mention that probably in my outreach, maybe. Another one that's really interesting that I think a lot of people don't do if you're really stuck is location. I have not been to Phoenix. Have you guys been to Phoenix? Tough crowd. Sam or Megan, have you guys ever been to Phoenix?
I have not, no.
No Phoenix. Phoenix for me.
I'm just asking everybody here. Anyone in the crowd? So like see, that's perfect. That's why I knew that. I knew that all along, by the way. If you go through and think about that, you could if you've been somewhere where someone has been, you could talk about your experience there sometimes. I remember speaking of AISP, I was meeting with a prospect in Chicago when I was going there for the leadership summit one year. I don't know, Nimit, I think we probably ran into each other there. at
Yeah,
some
I think
point.
we did. We did.
I'm
yeah.
starting to have flashbacks of being at actual conferences and seeing real people. But I set up a meeting with someone by rank. I literally ranked my favorite deep dish pizza places in Chicago because I really like deep dish pizza. Clearly, I have too much deep dish pizza. I got to work on that a little bit. But I might write an email to someone with my rankings and say it's not Giorgio's or whatever, like picking alternative ones and getting their opinion on it to editorialize it. Location's a really easy trigger if you've traveled and seen stuff. If you're someone out of college and you haven't been to a lot of places, there's other things too you can try and find.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Saw a chat with one of my, I know we're talking about email personalization, but there are other methods of personalization, which we'll actually talk about a little bit later. But there was somebody from Philly that came in. And so they were talking about like cheesesteaks and like a specific, they were more familiar with Philly than I am. But even just that location that got like that's kind of interesting. That's a very humanized approach. So people buy from people. So being able to relate on location level is good. All right. Anything else?
I think some things to add, just kind of relating to how we do our outreach. One, you can see, I like to look at company tenure as well, right? If someone's obviously new to a company, that's a point you can kind of talk about, hey, congrats on the new role, or use as a trigger event. But also someone being at a company for a long time, just because you don't see it a whole lot nowadays, that can also be a way to get into the conversation, right? Like saying, hey, congrats on being at the company for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And using that as a way, I'd love to learn about how this company has changed, how they've, how the sales development function has changed within the company over the past 5 years, right? Especially with everybody moving remote. Like you can come up with something. So using that for sure. I always like looking at weather, right? Like for Phoenix, for example, like it's very cold, and it's actually like cold, like 30s, 40s here, which doesn't happen a whole lot. So referencing that, we've had prospects that are based like, in the Northeast where they recently just got snow. So talking about that can be relatable. And at least for me, I went to University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. If you're a sports fanatic, they were the first 16 seed to ever be number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I've gotten tons of sales emails as soon as we won that game. I have tons of sales emails about it. And you can do easy searches on the schools they went to, especially if you've never really heard of it or it sounds pretty unique. UMBC has like one of the best chess teams in the world, like ranked number 3 in the world. So, talking about that too, you'd be surprised the kinds of things you can find about people's schools that aren't like really well-known schools.
Yeah. I'll just add one more thing, and then we could probably see what people have come up with. But one other thing I was thinking about, when I was a senior in high school, I had an English teacher. His name was Mr. Roderick. And one of the things that he was talking about in English was he was sharing a story about how there's kind of 3 stages of conversation. Stage 1 is current events and like small talk, things that you'd bring up that are common about that person. Stage 2 is common interests, or things you have in common with the person, things you might share an opinion on. And stage 3 is like feelings, fears, deep stuff, like stuff that you probably would talk about really late at night while you're eating grilled cheese because you had too much to drink. I actually don't drink, but I was just using that as a reference. But like deeper talks and stuff. The faster you can get to stage 2 with a prospect and find that thing you have in common on the profile, try and find things that you relate to. The 10-year mark at a company, by the way, is very impressive. That's really cool. I think that's something you could look up to and commend. I think it's a good example.
Awesome. So there's a lot of chatter in the chat too. So go through and read them if you haven't already, because there's a lot of comments about like what kinds of things you might say about Phoenix, for example, and like using that as an entry point. Somebody, sorry, I'm forgetting the name, was saying that they might post an article from Forbes or in the Wall Street Journal because they see that that's an interest of his. Talking about the tenure, I think is great. But there's one comment from Lisa, which I really liked. Which is, as a leader of an organization, I'm looking for something more unique in the initial outreach. Share an article or a link on something that might relate to the problem I'm dealing with in my role. And so I think from a persona-based messaging, that's really important. You might have content from your company, or you might be able to share content from a different company. As long as you're adding value with every step, that's super important. And then the kind of second layer of that too is you can see barely, but the featured, Nim is super active on LinkedIn. And so like interact with him on LinkedIn, see what he's interested in, see what he's commenting about. He might say, hey, I really like when a cold caller does this. Guess what? You should pick up the phone and do that specific thing when you're cold calling Nimit. So learning from LinkedIn too, especially if you have buyers that are active on it. All right. So second poll. I think I know how the answer is going to go, but do you guys personalize your email subject line? So we've been talking a lot about the actual content of the emails that we're sending, who's writing them, how much personalization we're doing, how much time we're spending. But let's talk about the subject lines real quick. So are you personalizing? Kind of knew this was going to go in this direction, but it's a pretty strong lean to yes. As we move on to the next couple of slides, I would love to hear you guys comment like some of the best subject lines that you've used, and then you guys can all steal them from each other and I can steal them from you too. So go ahead and comment those in as you guys would like. And don't forget to use the Q&A too if you have specific questions. I'm excited with how much chatter is going on, but I want to make sure I don't miss any actual questions either. All right. So yes, a very strong yes with 77% of the group personalizing email subject lines. All right, so we know what 2.0 is now, the individual-based messaging. So we're going to jump right into some examples of this, so we can get to just doing a quick time check. Things are very interactive, which I'm absolutely loving. So I want to make sure we have time to get to the end. All right, Nimit, hit us with your 2.0. Hit some of the highlights and why you think this was a good personalized email.
Yeah, so I think this plays perfectly into the comment in the chat that Lisa made about, I believe it was Lisa, sorry if I was wrong, about as a leader of an organization having more unique outreach. So as you can see here, so one of my AEs, Melissa, she went to Georgetown. She saw the prospect also went to Georgetown, but instead of just saying, hey, I also went to Georgetown, kind of taking it one step further yeah, I remember your pitch at your, I guess their riff on Shark Tank, it's called Bark Tank, Georgetown Bulldogs. Pitch a couple of years back, right? So referencing something that she actually was in attendance to, but you could probably also find this information just publicly as well. But commenting on that, complimenting them on excited to see your company take off. I'm also a product of the Georgetown entrepreneurship environment. Hope to connect with you, learn more about your 2022 plans. So I just love it's fellow Georgetown alum as the subject line is very personal. She got the meeting booked out of this. So yeah, I mean, I love everything about it. She leveraged the fact that the school that she went to, started doing some research into other people that have gone there and where the companies they're at now, and was able to find this and make it very, very specific to that prospect.
Of this. And then note on the subject line too, fellow Georgetown alum, chat soon. So love that. Also, there were some really good examples of subject lines. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read through them all, but go grab them and share them out with your teams and get some email subject lines tested. There's some good stuff in there. Thank you, Nimit.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add one thing to that email really quick, if that's okay. One thing I really like about the subject line too is it's vague enough to get the open, and it actually, Melissa's email relates to the body of the email. So don't just put a gimmicky subject. Whatever you use for a subject should be vague enough to draw an open, but actually relate to the body of the email so you follow through with it.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yes, Ryan. All right. Megan, this is your email. Talk to us about this email and how you use the different personalization tokens here.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this email, the entire focus is on the prospect. So you are a motivated leader who specializes in planning and executing. I noticed one of your recent LinkedIn posts, which this is a good call out, and I think somebody wrote it in the chat as well. If somebody's really active on LinkedIn and they write their own posts, that's also something really great to mention. Also at the end, the rep writes, I'm sure as the VP, you can see the importance of P&P and sales, which he had already referenced was person to person off of the LinkedIn post. So totally focused on the prospect, and then mentions that recent LinkedIn post to show that the rep has actually done their research.
Oh, can I make one tip for this email that I would do?
Sure.
I'd put the second sentence first. The second paragraph first. It'd probably get more opens because on the preview text, you'd see them like, oh, they saw something on my LinkedIn. I better click in and look.
I'm 1,000% with you. I think that this would absolutely be a stronger email if the second sentence was.
Yeah, you just flip it. Yeah, it's cool. It's a good example of this though.
Yeah.
Ryan, that's a good call out too, is those first like 5 to 10 words need to be strong, and because they're actually going to see that in the preview. And so it's almost like an extension of your subject line to help them understand whether or not they're actually gonna open it. So it's a good call out. Awesome. All right. Ryan.
This is scary. I wrote this for you right before this webinar.
I love it.
All right, so this is I do know more about Julianne than this, but I wanted to show an example of an email that I would send if I didn't know much about the person, but I wanted to find a way to personalize it to them individually. So in this instance, you're in Tampa, and the email I wrote basically was, "Hey Julianne, noticed you're located in Tampa. Did you know that Tampa is home to the world's largest continuous sidewalk? It's a 2.25 mile stretch of concrete along the Hillsborough River. Speaking of long walks, sales reps waiting to push new prospects into sequences have to walk 2.25 miles just to get to the point where they can send an email or do a call. Lead IQ makes it one step. We usually can cut down over 6 hours of busy work a week. What are your thoughts on talking sometime soon?" Would you respond to that email, or would you be like, "I hate you, take me off your list"?
I just commented. I'm definitely reading the rest of the email because I'm honestly probably thinking like, what is this guy talking about? Like, I'm not in city planning, but like, what is going on? But I'm intrigued, and it's personalized. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, I would want to understand like what it would get me to that point of like, okay, this is the value that they could potentially provide. But I think part of an email is one, like getting it to them to open it, but also getting them to read all of it. And so we haven't spent a lot of time talking about the length of the email. It's my personal belief that the email length can extend if it's super personalized and super relevant, and then ties those two things together, as Beck Holland would say. So making sure that it's intriguing definitely gets me to the bottom of the email. So awesome. All right. Any other thoughts on this one?
I mean, it's just so unique, right? It's like, it's not about sports. It's not about it's not about something that's like an easy kind of low-hanging fruit, right? You can be like, "Oh, I saw you're in Tampa. They won the Super Bowl last year," right? Like that's such an easy kind of tie-in. But yeah, and I'm sure, Ryan, I mean, did you know this fact, or you just type in Tampa?
I googled it, right? But while you guys before the webinar, I googled and looked up Tampa fun facts.
There you go. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I saw a comment too that it was like not one person's specific cup of tea. And I think like that's part of it. Like not every single email you write is going to hit to the right person. And then I think the biggest thing is just trying things that are different, trying things that are unique. And even if it wasn't your favorite email, I bet you read it all. Maybe not, but I bet you would read it all at least. So
I won't be offended if you wouldn't.
I would. And then also, hold on, that subject line, I kind of breezed past that, but that was super interesting and very like different than what else is sitting in my inbox right now. Cool. All right. So we're going to play the same little game. So you guys, we're not going to do 10 minutes, but we're going to do just a couple minutes. Take a look at Megan's profile and also throw in some ideas of things that you might be able to use to personalize this email if you are prospecting into Megan. Again, pretend that she's your persona, even if she's not the persona that you would sell into. What kinds of things would you be interested in reaching out about? And Nimit and Ryan, feel free to chime in as well.
So we're doing 2.0 here, which is kind of exciting on this. I'm trying to think of things that I would bring up here. The problem is I just know you guys all so well. It's hard for me not to get too detailed, right?
Well, I think one thing, Ryan, is you guys obviously have a good partnership with Outreach, but even just noting like the people that you have in common. I know it's kind of funny because we're doing this webinar and clearly we actually know each other. Yeah. But it is important to point out, like you might have mutual connections with somebody. I think you always don't want to over assume that this person knows this person really well. I get those messages a lot. And I'm like, I have no idea who that is. I'm so sorry. But if you can see it's somebody that they've worked with in the past or somebody that you know really well, you could even ask for an introduction. So Erin, I believe that's, sorry if I mispronounced that, but Erin talking about, did you see Gary Vee's last post? So referencing some of her interests. Talking about how her career path has gone. Megan has a really cool role and a really cool career path that's pretty unique, something worth mentioning. Wide range of preferences here. Folks love the message, others don't. Yes, again, like I think that going back to what Drew's saying about being authentic, it's always important to be authentic, and the ships are going to fall where they fall, right? And not every email is going to make sense to every single person, but that's why testing is so important. So we're getting some more Gary Vee in here, lots of Gary Vee in here, another Tampa resident. Yes, Megan and I live very close to each other. And then talking about different roles in such a short amount of time at Outreach, it definitely shows she has a lot of variety, and it shows that she understands different parts of the business. So depending on what you're selling, you want to kind of make things relevant based off of that.
Hey, Megan, do you know Brooke Bachesta well?
I do. I love Brooke.
I think Brooke would be my in. So like I was thinking of that. I'd probably mention Brooke because Brooke kind of does a lot. Like she probably does a lot of overlap stuff with you, right?
We work very closely together. Yes.
2 tips for people on LinkedIn that are going to be different. So like if Julianne had screenshotted this, it probably would be cheating a little bit because, you used to work there also. But you can also look at the people also viewed profiles on LinkedIn, and that can kind of, if they're connections that you have and you recognize those people, a lot of the time they've done things together. So like, for example, literally on my profile, Julianne and I are both people also viewed. Like I'm on yours and you're on mine. So that's another piece that you can do. If you're looking at social activity, you can see recent posts they might have done or opinions they shared about things going on. Last one is LinkedIn recommendations. Usually if you do a LinkedIn recommendation, you can kind of dissect who they know, and maybe one of those recommendations is someone that you know. And if not, maybe there's something in the recommendation that you could bring up in that cold email or cold call that you do. I know we're focused on cold emails here, but I actually like doing the LinkedIn recommendation stuff on cold calling too.
Awesome. All right. So 3.0. So this is the rep related messaging. This is tying something in, not just based off of you or the prospect or the company, but how it relates to potentially you. We've actually already covered some of this in 1.0 and 2.0 because we're looking at profiles. But let's jump into some of these emails. We'll start with this one from Emery Bloom.
So I think I may have mixed 2 of them up. This isn't rep related, but I'll talk about it anyway. Yeah. But this is just another way, like for us in our prospecting world, we're reaching out to a lot of sales individuals within B2B tech, which is kind of known to be an industry where people move around a lot, and a lot of people tend to meet each other and know each other really well. So finding some type of content that can be of value to them, not just saying, "Hey, I saw you're connected with this person, and I know them or we know of them." Saying we actually feature this person. If, let's say you have a use case with them at a previous company. If your company does any type of like podcasts or any type of like webinars like this, saying, yeah, we recently featured that person in a webinar. You can check out the episode here, and then kind of providing some type of value to them and looking for a call for the next week. So apologies on that. I think
I think this is still a really good email to just talk through. I think that the social proof here is really important. And, if you know people who I know, then I'm more likely to want to engage in the same type of topics. And so the fact that you already understand that they're connected with somebody that you also recently had on your podcast. And if you have somebody on your podcast, they might go listen to your podcast. They might see how awesome you are and how much you know about sales development and how much you can help fill their pipeline. So definitely love this. We are moving through this pretty quickly. We've got about 6 minutes left. Never short of chatter. So we'll go on to, I believe this is Megan's email.
Yes. So the first thing to call out is the subject line. So as you read at the end, the rep mentions growing up in Italy and ties the studying she was doing in Italy with the mission statement of this company she's reaching out to. So starts with Buongiorno and Happy Friday. So there's already a connection from the very beginning. The first sentence of this email is establishing that connection between the rep and the prospect before she goes into what we do at Outreach and how we could potentially help. I know in the chat there was some back and forth on if you ask for the meeting on a first cold email. As you can see, Amanda here just says, if you're interested, I'd be grateful to get your feedback and see if there's any synergy between our two companies. And then follows up with a podcast that is relevant to the prospect, the company, and the business. So this is an absolutely great email.
Great. Love it. Throw into the chat any thoughts that you guys have. But again, for the sake of time, we will keep moving right along so that we can get to Ryan's 3.0 email.
Yeah, so this person lived in New England, and I found on Twitter that they're a New England Patriots fan, and I'm a New England Patriots fan. Don't hate me. I've grown up since they were bad for the first 10 years of my life. The other thing that we both have in common is we both have companies that were purchased by Oracle, and we both left after Oracle bought them. So I brought up a joke about Oracle's red tape just to get some laughs and all that stuff and relate to that email. One thing I just want to mention too, if you notice all three of these emails, you could print them out, put them on a refrigerator, and anyone could understand the context of the personalization. And that's kind of key here to making it clear that like you're personalizing correctly.
Ryan, I'm going to print some of these emails off and put them on my refrigerator for sure.
Thank
so
you. Thank you.
for that idea.
It's like macaroni art.
Yeah, exactly. But prospecting emails. Love that. All right. We're going to cut the amount of time in half, but I do want to give Ryan some attention here. Let's talk about the type of personalization that we might do if we were to come across Ryan's profile. Ryan was a top prospect for us, and we would want to prospect into him. Any thoughts? I think one thing, as you guys are commenting in, also a long tenure at a SaaS company. So he's been there for 6 years. And so I think that is always something worth mentioning, as long as you're tying it into a way that's relevant. So for example, if I had been at the same company for 6 years, then potentially I would talk about how so much can change within an organization within a 6-year period or about 6 years. Anything else? Some interest. So like, this could be kind of interesting, but if one of your customers was ZoomInfo, I don't know that would particularly work with Ryan, but it could.
Yeah, it could.
That would be
We have a lot of overlap. Jonah Berger wrote a book called Contagious that's really cool and interesting. I'd recommend it if you want to read about it. But you could check out Jonah Berger and hear what he's about, and then bring that up maybe.
Yeah, I like that. The other thing too is like you can kind of get a feel for Ryan's personality just looking at his LinkedIn profile. And I don't think that's always going to be as obvious as it is with Ryan, but you can tell a guy likes to laugh. So see if you can make him laugh. I think just from not that that's a personalization token, but just the fact that it's the stylistic personalization. All right. Okay, we're gonna wrap up soon. I know we've got just a couple of minutes left, but I've talked about it a lot. If you can't tell, I love testing all of these things. So I want to hear from each of you. How are you testing success? Particularly interested in how you test success when it's personalized. So how do you know whether or not it worked? So whoever would like to start, what kind of metrics are you looking for? How do you know something's working? How do you know if you need to go a different course?
Should I jump in? I feel bad. I feel like I'm talking too much. We're running out of time, so I'll be really quick. We look at a thing called a prospecting efficiency score. And basically what it is how many touches does it take for a rep to get a meeting? It's that simple. You can diagnose things like if the rep's not going after enough people, if they have a high response rate and a high qualification rate, but a low meeting rate, they're not doing enough activity. There's a lot of random stuff like that you can look at. I'll try and find a blog post that I wrote about it and post it out on LinkedIn after this if you guys want to look at it.
Yeah, please do. Would love it.
One of the most important metrics we're looking at Outreach is positive sentiment. So we've kind of transitioned from looking at replies as a whole and looking at reply rate and measuring that to focusing way heavier on positive sentiment. Obviously, not all replies are created equal. We want to see the good replies. That's where the bread and butter is. That's what's going to lead you to a meeting or a rep to a meeting.
Yeah, I piggyback off Ryan. I mean, for us, we look to see how many touches it's taking to get in front of the person, especially when our target market is fairly finite, just people that we're reaching out to. So seeing that number, and then just looking at the same numbers everybody else is looking at, the open rates, the response rates. We'd rather get a response even if it's a no versus no response at all. And we also like to see phone versus email, like where we're seeing more success, because we might find within a particular vertical or a company size that we're seeing success with one over the other.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, we are right at time. I feel like the 4 of us should get together in a coffee shop or over a couple drinks after the COVID situation and continue this conversation, because I feel like I talked to you guys about this for a long time. So I hope all of you gained something helpful and useful out of this conversation. If you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, please feel free to do that. I'm sure we've got more things to talk about, more things to debate. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yes, of course, it will be recorded. Feel free to share with all of your colleagues. And until next time, have a great rest of your day.